So, hello everyone. This is a video regarding the AWS Certified Solution Architect Associate exam, which I gave yesterday and I cleared it. So, it's a video regarding its review and some of the exam questions I remember that I will be discussing in this video. And to begin with, to give you the credibility, I would like to show you the certificate. Let's load my account. And if I go to exam history, so you can see that AWS Certified Associate SAA-C03 exam date is of yesterday, that is of 10th of January. So these are my other exams. I recently gave the AI exam as well. I have made a couple of videos regarding it. You can watch it in my channel if you want. Now coming back to our topic, uh, that is of how the exam was. Basically, the exam was not easy or not difficult as well. I would rate it to a medium difficulty level. It basically covers the most of the AWS services, and it needs a bit of, like, you need to know a bit of details about each and every AWS service that is mentioned in the course, like the prerequisites that are required. Not much depth is required, but yeah, it's not easy as well. I found it a bit challenging in certain aspects of the exam. So yeah, without wasting the time, like, this is the basically the exam. It's like the domains that the exam has. There are four domains, and their topics are mentioned. You can refer this later. I will share it in the description part. Now coming to the exam questions that I remember. So one of the exam questions that I remember was basically on IAM access. Basically, it was mentioned that there are certain unused IAM users in an account, and the company wants to remove them. Like, company wants to know, like, what are the unused IAM users, and they want to remove it to prevent unauthorized access, basically. So now, out of four options, two options you could easily eliminate because it was direct. Like, one of the options was using Amazon Makey. So Makey you can directly eliminate because Makey is something that is used to identify personal identity, like personal information S3. So there is no use of Makey here. The other two options were, one was IAM Access Analyzer, and one was IAM Access Advisor. Now these both options can confuse you. Now, if you know about this, basically IAM Access Analyzer, this one is for identifying basically shared resources, like to prevent unauthorized access. Basically, like, if I have a S3 bucket and I have public access on there, so it's basically my bucket is publicly accessible, so I'm sharing a resource. So it is basically used for that, identifying resources that are shared across accounts or publicly. And IAM Access and like IAM Access Advisor, the below one, this is basically used to identify unused IAM users based on the latest timestamp. Basically, if you go to IAM Access Advisor in the AWS console, it will tell you which IAM user was used when latest. So basically here the answer would be IAM Access Advisor. So it's based on latest timestamp. It lets you know the unused IAM user. So the answer would be IAM Access Advisor here. Now one question that I remember was for VPCs. Basically, it was saying that like, I will just write the main points in the, like, the main, not the, like, the questions would be large. I'm just writing the key points in the question to not to waste any time. So basically, there were EC2 instances in a private subnet, and in a VPC basically. So and now these instances need to, like, there was also a DynamoDB in the picture. So now the EC2 instances need to connect to DynamoDB, to the basically database. So how you can do that? EC2 instance on a private VPC and DynamoDB is in, like, outside the VPC. So basically, I do not remember the options here, but the basic idea is that you have to create a VPC endpoint for DynamoDB, and for DynamoDB, basically you have to create a gateway endpoint, like gateway VPC endpoint. So one of the options would be that create a gateway endpoint, gateway VPC endpoint for DynamoDB, and from there EC2 can connect to that endpoint. Now there was one more question related to this, like similar, like EC2 instances are in private subnet. Now the concern is that these instances, basically it was mentioned that they need internet connectivity to download some updates or all, something was mentioned. So how could like how could this happen? So again, I don't remember the options, but the main idea here is that in such a cases you need to have a NAT gateway, and NAT gateway now in public subnet. Basically you have to, since your instances are in private subnet, you have to have an NAT gateway in the private subnet. So basically the EC2 instances, sorry for the spelling, EC2 instance in the private subnet. So how will the connection flow is, it will connect to the NAT gateway in the public subnet. Basically the private IPs of EC2 would connect to the NAT gateway. Now when you create a NAT gateway, elastic IP is given. Now what happens next is, now you have to create an internet gateway outside the VPC. So the NAT gateway using the elastic IP will connect to the internet gateway, and then you have to update the route tables. So basically this is how you will have internet connectivity for the private EC2 instances. You got my point, right? EC2 instances are in the private subnet. You have to create a NAT gateway in the public subnet and an internet gateway outside the VPC. So the NAT gateway using the elastic IP would connect to the internet gateway for internet connectivity. So remember this part. One of the options would be this only. So you can do that. Coming to the next one, I don't remember the question exactly, but it was basically for DDoS attacks. So one point to mention is that sorry, that whenever DDoS attacks are in picture, you have to think of AWS Shield. And what the hell, Shield. And whenever it's about SQL injection attacks, SQL injection or cross-site scripting attacks, it's WAF. So just remember this part. So the question was on DDoS attacks. Like it was mentioned that organizations using DDoS attacks. So what should you do? There were options like AWS Shield, AWS WAF, some of the two options, some worthless options were there. So you are like the person can get confused between WAF and Shield. So in case of DDoS, Shield would be the better choice. In case of SQL injection or cross-site scripting or layer 7 attacks, WAF would be the better choice. Next, hmm, now one question that I found confusing was that basically it was mentioned that there is a company which is getting a lot of requests, from some lot of requests from malicious IPs all over the world. Now and basically I don't remember, like I think they had a ELB or something, like ELB was there. So a lot of requests were coming from the ELB, and such requests which are not required, so some malicious requests. So now out of four options, two were straight away eliminated. The two options left was, one was like you have WAF, and it was mentioned to block those IPs using WAF. And one option was like use WAF bot based rules. So now, nightly the first option looks better, but in case of bots also, like when it's mentioned around the world. So when a bot based attack happens, so they also like the bots also use IPs to communicate with the network, right? So now the issue here is like it is not mentioned clearly that uh, because like let's say even if we block those IPs using WAF, and we do not know that the attack is happening using the same IPs or different IPs. Even if we block a certain number of IPs, it could be possible that requests are coming from multiple IPs, so the issue does not get resolved, right? Because requests will still be coming from other IPs. But if the issue was due to bots, so if you use the WAF bot based rules, the issue could be eliminated. So the question was not clearly worded, but I guess the first option looks better than this. So, but still, we do not know the answer, so it's a bit confusing, right? And moving to the next part. So, now coming to decoupling the part. So, something related was like written like there are many microservices interconnected to each other. There are many microservices interconnected to each other, and there is a sort of latency happening. So, how can the solution architect or the developer reduce the interdependencies? So, in such case, you have to think that if we decouple the application, like the microservices do not depend on each other. So, reduce the interdependencies. So, in such cases, options were like SQS and SNS, something like this. So, SQS is a decoupling application. So, whenever decoupling happens or whenever you need something where you have to like reduce the interdependencies, so SQS is the better option here. One simple question was regarding S3 classes. Basically, it was like company needs to store data for 7 days, and after that, it does not need the data. So, and like after that, it does not need the data to retrieve it immediately, but it needs to store data for let's say 1 year, something like that was mentioned. So it's a classic use case of S3 lifecycle rules. Like first, you can store it for whichever whatever days that I mentioned in the S3 standard for quick retrieval, and after that you can put it into Glacier. Basically, lifecycle policies. And moving to next part, one was for hmm, let me think. It was something like a company needs to migrate its database to AWS. Migrate database to AWS, and it needs high availability. High availability across regions. This is the main gist of the question. Question was very large. Options were like RDS for it was a MySQL database. So RDS for MySQL, and one was DynamoDB. One was Amazon Aurora. multi-AZ certain. Now DynamoDB can directly emulate it because it's a MySQL database, which is a relational database. And DynamoDB is a NoSQL database. It is removed. Two options are left: multi-AZ RDS and Amazon Aurora. Now it says high availability across regions. So here is mentioned easy, multi-easy. It would not be beneficial. So directly Amazon Aurora is the right answer. Further, Amazon Aurora has a global table as well, which has like replicated across many regions and many replicas. So Aurora would be the correct answer here. And now one interesting question that I still find confusing is, basically, it was a long question. The gist was that the company basically needed a uh, database for hierarchical data. Now, hierarchical data is something in tree format, like there's a parent node and there are child nodes. Now, options were like S3, Redshift, DynamoDB. Now, S3 is not it's object-based storage, so it's directly eliminated. Now, coming to Redshift and DynamoDB. So, the DynamoDB is a new SQL database. Basically, it's for non-structured data. Redshift, if you're aware of, it's a columnar data. Columnar data is something like we have a normal table. There are rows and columns, but in columnar data, it is like the data is stored in columns, so it's still a structured data. However, DynamoDB is a NoSQL database used for unstructured data. So now, in my opinion, hierarchical data would be unstructured. So in my case, DynamoDB should be the answer, but I'm not sure because we do not know the answers though. But yeah, you can, like, if you have any comments on it, you can let me know. And if you find anything as well, please let me know. Um, what else? There was certain questions regarding history, intelligent tiering, history standard classes as well. So do see that as well. Further, private AWS, there were certain questions on AWS private link. So read about that. I don't remember the question. And kinesis as well. So basically, kinesis, simple use cases. Whenever you see, you have to store or analyze real-time data, streaming data. So kinesis come into picture there. Remember that. One more thing, yeah. Mm. Now, if you would be aware of auto scaling groups, right? Now, auto scaling groups, like they scale based on AZs, like on availability zones, not on regions. Now, certain questions would have wordings there's application. It has its own instances. It needs to scale to meet the demands of the requests are high or something. So two options would be there. Like one would be that auto scaling, like use auto scaling groups based on AZ. One option would be like use auto scaling groups based on regions, like use auto scaling group across regions. And one would be use auto scaling groups across AZs. Now, the simple thing to note is that across regions it's not possible because auto scaling groups are based on AZs. So you can simply eliminate the part where it says auto scaling group across regions. It's because auto scaling group acts on AZs. Further, one question that I remember now is you would be aware of DAX. Basically, it's a cache type of cluster for data, DynamoDB. So the question was that customer has configured DAX, and he has not enabled encryption. and now he wants to enable encryption for that. So how can he do that? So one option was that he can stop the DAX, restart it again, not like stop it, enable encryption and restart it again. The other option was that delete the DAX, create it again, and enable encryption while creating. So in most AWS services, like in most databases like RDS also, if you do not enable encryption in the beginning, so we cannot enable it in mid-tier. So what we have to do is, in case of RDS, we have to put a snapshot and then enable encryption, and the process goes on. Similarly in DAX also, in once you have already created the DAX, you cannot enable encryption in between. So simply you have to delete it, create it again, and while creating, select the encryption option. Now one question was that a client has issues like his requests from EC2, like his requests are always going to a particular EC2 only, leading to some issues, and the EC2 are behind the ELB, something like that was mentioned. So option was that he can disable stickiness and he can disable connection draining. Rest two options are not relevant, so I have not writing, other I don't remember also. So it's a easy version. Stickiness is something like when we want that request from a particular user should go to a particular instance only. So it's beneficial sometimes, but it can also lead to issues. So therefore, if it's leading to issues, we can disable the stickiness. Connection draining is a different concept. It's basically like when a target like EC2 instance or a ELB is not healthy. So we give some time, like connection draining time, for the existing connections to go through. So that is a different thing. Now what else? I will not make this video large. So one thing is like a lot of questions on CloudFront and Global Accelerator. So basically, when you are concerned about content distributions, first thing you should come in mind is CDN. So a CloudFront is the best combination. Now sometimes this is also given in the option, that is AWS Global Accelerator, because this also improves the performance of applications for global users. So that basically thing to keep in mind in Global Accelerator is used for basically TCP and UDP traffic, that is layer 3, layer 4. And CloudFront, is application layer, like it all works on application layer, so layer 7, it like basically HTTP traffic. So it's a clear sign when to use what. And one more thing is, like, in certain cases it is also mentioned that the application need to have certain static IPs. In case of CloudFront, you do not get a static IPs, instead you get a CDN distribution domain name that you use for making requests. But if the use case says that you need static IPs, so then also you can think of Global Accelerator. So these are two things that you need to remember: TCP, UDP traffic, and static IPs. Two static IPs are allotted when you use Global Accelerator. And one question was that customer wants that the objects uploaded to S3 must be encrypted in REST as well in transit. I don't remember the options, but the solution is basically like in bucket policy. What you can do is, for REST one, you can add a condition of XAMC server side encryption header. Basically, here it means that when this header is present, then only the bucket policy will allow the object to be uploaded. And for transit one, there is a header that says AWS secure transport. that you can add in your bucket policy. Basically, it's for SSL enforcing HTTPS SSL connections. If you have any confusion, you can read about this headers. And also, there would be certain questions on system manager parameter store. Just read about it. It has certain parts like automation. One is patch something. When you need to patch all these two instances together, there's a run command. I don't remember the questions, but I remember certain parts from here. So that is it. Now, one question was basically on saving costs when using EC2. Two options that I remember was instance saving plan and compute saving plan. Now, the basic difference between instance and compute saving plans is in instance saving plan you get flexibility to change instances between a family, like the instance family remains same. Flexibility to change between between like the family remains same. Let's say you have a C5 dot x large, you can change it to C5 2x large. Basically the family remains same, but in families you can use a larger instances. Flexibility. In saving plans you can also change the family. Basically you can go from, let's say, C4 to M5, something like that. So more flexibility is there in compute saving plan. So depending on what's mentioned, I don't remember it exactly now, but depending on what's mentioned, you can choose the option. Last thing that I remember is basically it's EFS versus EBS. Now the question is something like that. There are EC2 instances across many EZs, and they need a shared storage like shared storage from where they can access data. So which storage should the architect use? One would be EBS, one would be EFS S3. So now in case of EBS, remember that EBS is AZ specific. So if instances are in different AZs, so they cannot use like a same EBS in a which is present in a single AZ. But in case of EFS, it's not AZ specific. So EFS provides storage which multiple EC2 instances across different AZs can access. So EFS would be the correct answer here because it provides shared storage. That's all what I remember for now. To give you certain tips that I would say that since we have come so far in this video, so I would say is that certain tips that I can give you is whenever you see decoupling, think of SQS. Whenever you see that you need to reduce the interdependencies or between services, reduce interdependencies, use SQS. Where you have Windows file server, the storage for storage it's for FSX for Lustre. If you have Linux, it would be EFS. For Linux file server, the storage is EFS. And if you see something related to streaming data, real-time data, and you have to use a service for that, it's mostly Kinesis because it is designed for that only. EBS, EFS, I've already told you that EBS is area specific. And so for shared storage, you have to use EFS if there are instances across multiple AZs. And if you see, I see storage, it's storage gateway. Actually, this is for last minute things if you have not heard about it. So storage gateway volume type. And one thing you can, like, whenever there is a question regarding reducing operational overhead or making least code changes, so and the question revolves around having a cache system. So if there is a elastic cache mentioned, elastic cache, actually to configure elastic cache it needs a lot of code changes. So keep that in mind. If there's a lot of operational head is you do not want to have, then elastic cache is not the way to go. Further, if you're using DynamoDB, the maximum object size is 400 KB for a single object. Multiple questions can come, not directly but interdependently. Like one question I remember now is the question would say that which database would you use, and it was mentioned that the object size is 1 MB. So, and the best option was looking was DynamoDB only, but only the catch was that the size was 1 MB, so DynamoDB would not be in the picture. So you have to like look at the small things. Further, like when nothing is mentioned, always like when nothing is exactly mentioned which service to use, serverless or serverless, like having servers. So always go with serverless services because it's easier to manage. And one more thing, if you're using Lambda, remember that the timeout limit is 15 minutes. There are multiple questions that it will say because Lambda is the serverless service, it's most easy to use. So whenever like read the question carefully, it says that how much time the processing takes. If it's taking more than 15 minutes, you cannot use Lambda. So that's all that I remember now. Uh, if I remember anything, I will try to make another video. But as of now, it's all that I know. So yeah, and one more thing, like the sources from where I studied was basically Stephen Marek course from Udemy. That's the only source that I studied from. Yep, that's all for this. Have a great day. Cheers.